can all see my screen. If you can, if one of you could just unmute and kind of say
Yeah, we
yes
are
or no.
able to
Yeah,
see. Yes, we
awesome.
can.
Okay. Okay. So thanks everybody for joining in today. I know it's a Saturday morning. Everybody wants to kind of chill in, but thank you for taking the time to kind of join here and kind of learn more about how you can kind of improve your pet's well-being on a plant-based diet. So today's question is rather more like, can dogs thrive on plant-based diets? Because this is something I get very often. And this was a question I had myself when I adopted my dogs almost 10 years ago, or actually 12 years ago. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of put this together, because being from a Gen background where like meat and such products are really kind of and ethical as well as a religious from a religious standpoint, it's not something that is acceptable, and also more of a conscious thing, right? Like so when I adopted Curry and Brownie, basically I wanted to know if I could adopt them and kind of put them on a plant-based diet, because there was no way I was going to be able to bring meat at home. And so that's where I kind of began this journey, and we'll kind of dwell into that a little bit later, but I just kind of wanted to give you a background on how I got started with this, right? Um, so this is our first session since starting here. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for everyone for joining in today. And you can stay tuned with us and learn from us more by following us on Instagram and Facebook, and connecting with us through WhatsApp. My goal is to be able to educate and help people, help support people who are kind of raising dogs on a plant-based diet. So So with that, we kind of get started with, can dogs thrive on a plant-based diet? So before I go into the details, I hope everybody's familiar with Google Meet. If not, make sure you use this to kind of mute your lines. And this is your video control. I encourage everybody to turn on their videos, especially during the Q&A, just so that it's a more interactive session and I kind of get to know you on a more one-on-one basis. And then this is the chat window where you can actually put in your questions that you have. And so that way we will address those later on. Okay. So as today's topic, as all of you know, is, can dogs thrive on a plant-based diet, right? So what we're going to be covering to kind of discover that if they can or cannot is basically we're going to figure out whether dogs are truly omnivores or carnivores, because this is something that's always the first thing that comes up, and it's a debate. The second part that we're kind of going to understand a little bit and dwell into is, what are a canine's nutritional needs? And then what are the sources of nutrition and how they can be met? And then what research is available from a plant-based diet for canines? And then should we or should we not feed a plant-based diet? And we'll open up the lines for Q&A. So first, since there are a few new people here, I'd like to introduce myself to you guys. I'm Hetal Sheth. I was basically a techie in the Silicon Valley, living in California, where I adopted both my dogs. That's the the beige one is Curry and the brown one is Brownie. So these were my two rescues that I adopted, and that's when I kind of began this journey, which was like around 2014. So 2012 is when I adopted both my dogs, and I kind of realized that there were not many plant-based holistic options to be able to raise dogs naturally. So that's where I kind of started this Korean pepper journey back in California in 2014. And then about a year and a half ago, I moved to India with my dogs. So I decided to kind of start this path over here because my goal and mission is to be able to create more happy and healthy dogs by increasing awareness of plant-based Ayurvedic resources to promote their mind, body, and soul well-being. Because there have been studies that have shown that dogs are also, not just dogs, but animals in general, are conscious beings, and they also are very sentient. So they do have a spiritual part and deserve the attention at the level of mind, body, and spirit. So that's my goal, basically, to be able to kind of nurture them in the right way, where they have holistic healing through all the three aspects. So in today's webinar, we will be particularly focusing on whole food plant-based diets. So with that, we can kind of get started. So our first topic or question is, whenever you kind of talk to anybody, like, if dogs can eat a plant-based diet, the first thing that people say that dogs are carnivores, while some will argue they're omnivores. So what's the truth, right? While there has been a lot of research, and we will dwell into some of those aspects through this presentation. While dogs belong to the genre carnivores, they're actually omnivores. And we will see how that has come into being. So dogs, kind of like most of us know, have descended from the gray wolf. And they had the domestication process began several thousands of years ago. It's depending on the research that you read, it ranges from like maybe 27,000 years to like 40,000 years ago, which is actually a long time. So that's when domestication began. Like some studies suggest that domestication first started like in Eurasia, and then it kind of spread to the other parts of the world. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper and see what the studies kind of show. So that kind of gives you a better understanding on, like how the dog's physiology and psychology have changed over a period of time. So the belief is basically that from the research that since during the Ice Age, so that's like a really long time ago, during the Ice Age, there were two primary predators, the humans and the wolves, basically. So both were the top contenders for food. So because resources at that point during the ice, when there was a lot of ice sheets and everything over the planet, the resources for food were not very many. So they were kind of competing. So during that process is when this commingling of the species started between the wolves and the humans. And they kind of, started approaching more of the human areas where food remains were available. And so they kind of, over a period of time, they kind of learned that, they could coexist together, and it could be a mutually beneficial relationship. And we will see how that happened a little bit more. So that's when basically the process of domestication began. This is just to give you a highlight on like how it's not something that was a few hundred or a few thousand years ago, but it was several thousand years ago. So that was basically what we saw. What I just mentioned was in the Ice Age. What happened in the Bronze Age? So there was a study that was done basically in Germany, where actually they found like bones of a dog, like the jaw bones and stuff like that, that they discovered or unearthed. And in that study, what they found was that dogs were kept as pets back in Stone Age. So that's even before Bronze Age. So the commingling and living with human species has been there. So the evolution process of domestication started quite a long time ago. There was another study that was done in Barcelona, Spain, by the University of Barcelona. They actually basically dug up some remains around a certain area of Barcelona, where they kind of found several remains of dog skeletons. Basically, when they kind of analyzed and studied those skeletons, it turned out they were about 3,000 years ago. And what they found from the research and the studies that they did on those bones was that there were about 36 skeletons that were unearthed, which were from like Bronze Age and Iron Age. They found that 9 were carnivores, 10 were 8 mainly omnivorous food, so plant-based and meat-based, but 17 mostly ate plants. So back in those days, around that time, the plant-based ingredients were mainly cereals and grains, such as millets. So this process has been going on. This evolutionary process has been going on for a long time. And dogs have been, domesticated dogs have been exposed to these kind of plant-based materials for a long time. So this kind of pretty much says that, dogs could basically accept and digest plant-based matter. So what happened is, over these several thousands of years, as the wolf kind of started living in the communities where humans were living, they started their body, and they didn't have to go hunting. So before I kind of dive into the physical changes, a little bit, let's understand about how the wolves are in the wild, because that kind of gives you a little comparison of what the modern dog is versus the wolf, right? So, like, for example, the wolf in the wild, they would basically be they would have more of a prey drive. They would actually go hunt for food, right? So they would eat the live carcass. They would basically go hunt the meat and eat the whole carcass. It's not going to be like processed food that they're going to be eating, right? So, and then they would go for several days, even months, without food. So their nutritional requirement is very different from a modern dog. So a wolf, basically, because of its life in the wild, it would need like 50% meat and fat. Because of the periods of fast that they go in between, like because it really depends on when they find their next meal, right? So their nutritional requirement and lifestyle is very different from a modern dog. A modern dog, or a domesticated dog that lives with us, basically does not have to go hunting in the first place for food. Secondly, they get 2 meals, 3 meals served every day. So they don't have to look out or seek out for food. It's something that's readily available for them. So their nutritional requirements are different. They're fed on a daily basis. They're not going through the long periods of fast like wolves, where their basic requirements may not be met for a certain period of time. So they have to derive energy from the stored fat, unlike for dogs, which is not the case, right? So I think it's important to keep these lifestyle aspects into mind when thinking about diet. So given that their lifestyles were different and had begun changing as wolves started adapting and living with humans, and that's how the dog came into being, right? They started going through certain changes physiologically, genetically, and internally from the digestibility perspective. So you will notice that this is the jaw of a wolf. Look at how different it is. The jaw is much larger than that of a dog. The noses are shorter because dogs don't have to go hunting, so they don't. While their sense of smell is still strong, they don't have like larger noses like the wolf, because they don't have to go hunting for food. So their noses started evolving or adapting. Um, and then their canines, while large, they're not as large as the wolves. And you'll also see that the teeth are basically not as sharp as that of a wolf. But, so these are some changes that they basically started going through. Like a wolf would have to tear the carcass through and get to the meat, right? So their jaws are the muscles are much stronger as compared to dogs, because they didn't have to do that, because they were served meat or scraps from like whatever Stone Age, Bronze Age food that they were getting, right? So these things led to a physiological evolution of certain aspects of from wolf to dog. Um, so there was a study that was done basically to understand like if dogs could, process plant-based ingredients, specifically carbs or starches. So the study basically revealed that dogs adapted their DNA to digest starch. So there were genetic changes that occurred as part of this evolution to be able to support that. So while humans are able to digest starch because they have a higher number of copies of the genetic marker called the AME2B gene, which basically allows processing of starches, right? So that it's digested and absorbed properly. They found as part of the study that this happened with dogs too. Like while wolves have lower number, dogs have a higher number. And I'm just going to play this video so that you can see what the study suggests basically.
Hetal, we are unable to hear to the audio of the video that you're sharing.
Uh, you're not able to hear the video audio?
No, we can't do that.
Okay. Uh,
No, still not. We can't hear it.
okay. Uh,
Do you have a link to the video? Maybe I can help share my screen and share the audio.
uh, yeah, I don't have it right now, but maybe what I can do is I'll basically just go through what this video goes through. And I'll play the video just because we are recording. I think the audio might come out better in the recording, actually. And I'll also share what this video basically suggests. So this video, what basically it suggests is like over a period of time, dogs actually doubled the number of AMI2B genes, which is not the case with wolves. So that basically suggests that as part of the domestication process, wolves evolved from dogs and dogs evolved from wolves, and they kind of adapted their genetic structure to be able to digest plant-based matter. So this video basically also suggests that uh, the process of digestion because of these genes makes it more viable as well. So it's not that dogs cannot digest carbs or starches, because this is something that they have been used to eating for a long period of time. And there are certain additional changes that have been the dogs have been adapted to as part of these evolutionary changes that we will kind of see in a little bit. So I'll just run this video in any case, because this will actually come out to be more clear in the recording. So when you go through the recording, you'll actually be able to see it. So this video was actually provided by HHMI Bio Interactive. So in case if you want to go back and look at the original video on YouTube, you could do that.
The other thing we looked at was the data set that you guys, the sample.
Are you guys able to hear? Can any one of you just unmute your line and confirm if you can hear when I play the video now?
Yes, I'm there. Please play.
Yes, we can hear it. That we looked at with the data set that you guys, the samples that you sent in, was we actually went back in time, and rather than worrying about what was going on with these dogs down here, kind of the breeds and things, we actually went back and said, all right, what actually separates the dogs from the wolves? So wolves are not dogs. You would not want a wolf living in your house. They tend to be very violent, and they tend to eat people and small children. And so clearly dogs and wolves are different animals. And there's a lot of hypotheses as to why dogs started living with us. They might have been eating our garbage. It's possible they helped us with hunting, or they warned us when other people were coming around. But the question is, can we actually compare dogs to wolves and find out where those differences are? And so what we did is we took, so this is actually, it's plotting a different measurement, but it's the same idea where you have all of the chromosomes across the bottom, and what it's measuring is just the dog-wolf difference. And so we're actually able to do this now because of all this genome sequencing that we've been talking about over the past couple of days. So they could actually get genome sequence from a whole lot of wolves and from a whole lot of dogs, compare their genomes and say, where are they the most different? And so what you can first of all see, as compared to that coat color picture that I showed you earlier in the presentation, is there's a lot of different peaks in here. So there's a lot of different places in the genome where dogs and wolves are different, which you would expect given how different they are. And the one that we're actually going to focus on today is this one right here. So this black peak here, right here, is at a gene called the amylase gene. And the amylase gene is involved in digesting starch. And what they found is that when they looked at the wolves that they'd sequenced and said, okay, what's going on at the amylase gene? The wolves had exactly what you would expect. As I said, you get one copy of your genome from your mother and one copy from your father. So you have two copies of each gene in your genome normally. And when they tested 35 different wolves, and every single one of them had two copies of the amylase gene, exactly what you'd expect. But when they tested 136 dogs, what they found out was that every single one of them had more than two copies and up to 30 different copies of the amylase gene. And when you think about it, why on earth would you duplicate a gene? Well, the more copies of the amylase gene you have, the more the greater the amount of the amylase protein you can make. And the more protein that you're making, the more starch you can break down. And so basically, the fewer copies you have, that you're going to digest starch worse or less efficiently. You may not be able to get as much energy out of the food when you're eating starch. The more copies of the amylase gene you have, the more, the better you're going to be able to digest starch. And probably what happened is that when dogs started living with us, the first thing they needed to do in order to exploit us as a resource is learn how to eat our diets. And so they actually evolved the ability to digest starch much better than wolves can. And interestingly enough, there's other researchers that have looked at the amylase gene in humans and found out that humans compared to chimpanzees have extra copies of the amylase gene, probably for exactly the same reason.
So that is just to give you an idea of like the evolutionary process at the DNA level and how dogs have adapted to be able to coexist or and live and adapt with our diets as well. So the other aspect is the microbial function, right? So basically, we know that the dog's digestive system is different from the human digestive system. The humans have a longer GI tract as compared to dogs who have a shorter digestive tract. So they had to adapt and be able to digest the plant-based matter that they were kind of eating at that time. So basically what happened or what started happening, and there was a research that was done back in Solerolo, where the study actually revealed that the bacteria in the gut of a dog started changing to be able to break down cellulose and starch, which comes from plant-based items. Interestingly enough, there was also significantly different enzymes that were present in the dog's gut to be able to break down carbohydrates, especially like amylose, sucrose, and maltose, so that the food was being digested. So these were gut-related changes that kind of happened, which is what we call as the gut microbiome. So they found that not just the genome copy changed, but also the gut bacteria that existed in the gut also adapted to be able to digest plant-based matter. Whereas when they looked at wolves, this was not the case. The gut bacteria in the wild wolves was completely different. So this also suggests that the Neolithic dogs, these are not even like more recent, these are more like Neolithic dogs that started making these adaptations to be able to digest plant-based matter. So I've included the links for all of these researchers in the presentation, which when you get after this meeting, you can actually, if you're interested, you can kind of go into and read these for further reading. So that basically suggests that dogs have evolved to be able to digest plant-based matter as compared to wolves. So now the question is, so do dogs still need to be fed like wolves? Let's figure that out now. So dogs have specific nutritional requirements, right? So these nutritional requirements are very different from that of a wild wolf. So like I mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation, that wild wolves need like 50% protein and fat. Basically, because they derive energy from fat and they go through long periods of fasting. So their requirements for protein and fat are very different from that of a dog. A dog who is fed 2 meals a day, is getting his water, does not have to go hunting, is not exercising as much as like a wild wolf, has different nutritional requirements. So typically their requirements are not as intense as that of a wolf, and we will dive into what those requirements are in detail in a little bit. But before that, I think when you talk about canine nutrition requirements, there are 3 things that we have to bear in mind.
One is palatability, second is bioavailability and digestibility, and third is nutritional soundness. And when we talk about nutritional soundness, I will get into the details of what a dog's nutrient requirements are. So palatability, we all want to make sure that our dogs are enjoying the food that they eat, because as part of being able to eat, that also kind of drives their digestive and assimilation process, just like humans, right? So palatability is important, because if your dog's not going to like the food, it's going to be challenging for them to get the nutrition that they need. So second part is bioavailability and digestibility, right? So what is bioavailability? Bioavailability is basically the food that the dogs eat, how much of that food or the nutrition in that food is being absorbed by your dog. Right, so that's basically what the bioavailability is. So there is, when you talk about meat-based, plant-based, there's this thing that always comes up, that plant-based food is not as bioavailable, or plant-based food is not as digestible as meat-based food. So just to help you understand, like typical commercial dry dog food that's made out of meat has digestibility between 75 to 82%, right? And then raw meat and cooked food, cooked meat diets, they have a digestibility which is higher than the commercial kibble, between 87 to 98%. So where does plant-based matter lie? So properly prepared plant-based foods have digestibility of 85 to 98%. So you can see the difference now, right? Like where it's pretty much online, pretty much within the range of where meat-based diet lies. So there have been research studies done to kind of analyze the digestibility of certain plant-based ingredients to see where the digestibility falls. And this is what they have found, that that things like corn, barley, rice, sorghum, wheat, cassava flour, which is again like from a root vegetable, lentils, peas, etc. The digestibility ranges anywhere between 85 to 98%. And you can read these research articles later on when I send the links. So that way you kind of know and are more knowledgeable about the nutritional availability if you're going to plan on feeding a plant-based diet. So that covers our bioavailability aspects. So now what about the nutritional soundness, right? Like, is my dog going to get all the nutrients that they need? So what does a dog need, right? So a dog basically needs protein that is 20 to 25% of the meal, which is way, way less than what a wolf needs. Fats between 5 to 10%. Again, that is way less than what a wolf would need, right? And carbs around 20% or so. So another thing is, while wolves cannot derive energy from carbs, they derive energy from fats. Dogs are able to derive energy both from fats and carbs. So that's another change that has happened as part of the evolution process, right? And then they need certain essential minerals, vitamins, and moisture or water to be able to kind of help with the digestion process and assimilate all the nutrients that they are required, right? So this is like at a macro level, at a very high level, this is what a canine nutritional profile food should contain. But the detail is more like important here, especially like, you know, when you're talking about protein, it's not just the number of grams of protein that your dog is getting in the diet. The key is, are they getting all the essential amino acids that they need? So dogs require 10 different essential amino acids, which are the building blocks of their bodily functions. So if they don't get any of these amino acids or fall short of it, you will see health issues. There will be issues with cellular function. You will see heart issues, loss of muscle, and things like that. So basically getting even behavioral aspects, right? So it's very essential that they get these 10 amino acids. And then they get the fats. So these are like the omega-3s, omega-6, linoleic acid, ALA, and things like that, making sure that they get the right amount of fats that they need. And then carbs, right? So carbs come from a lot of the plant-based matter that you're using, so they kind of get it from there as well. So then there are essential minerals, trace minerals that are required for proper cellular function. So if the dog's body is going to be lacking in these minerals, then you will see issues with their digestion, you will see issues with their growth, you'll see issues with their skin, hair, coat condition, and things like that, right? Like as well as brain function and stuff like that. Because if you think about it, a dog's body, like a human's body, is made up of multiple cells, and most of these cells require these elements to be able to function at the right level. So if any one of this aspect is not there, the cell is not going to be able to function, and eventually the body is not going to be able to function, and that's when disease will manifest, right? So likewise, they need about 10 to 11 different vitamins, which are kind of, again, essential for proper cellular function and bodily function. So there is a guideline that is defined, like what the amino acids are, what levels they should be at, what minerals, what vitamins are needed, and what the range is for a puppy, for an adult dog, for senior dog, because based on the age span, their needs are very different. Like, for example, a puppy would need a lot more protein and fat. They would need extra zinc and selenium, calcium, different calcium and phosphorus requirements for a puppy, as compared to an adult dog who is more like at a maintenance stage, right? So their requirements would be a little bit lower than a growing puppy. Senior dogs is completely different, because now they're kind of aging. Their requirement would be a little bit more higher protein and higher fat, to be able to prevent things like muscle loss and derive better energy, right? So these are different aspects that you need to consider when kind of feeding your dog, right? So based on that, there's a committee which is called AFCO that puts out the nutrient profile, and I'll just share that so that you can see, you can just get a glimpse of what it looks like and understand better what the nutritional requirements of a dog are. So this is basically what the AFCO guideline suggests: nutrients based on the life stage, whether it's growth and reproduction, and adult maintenance. So these are the different protein or the amino acids that the dogs need. So these are the 10 essential amino acids that are required, where methionine and cysteine are very critical for the heart function, because when methionine and cysteine combine, the body is able to generate taurine, which is very essential for a healthy heart. But studies have revealed that as food is prepared, there is some loss of nutrients and things like that. So there's additional supplementation of amino acids like taurine and carnitine that would be naturally available if a dog were to eat the heart of another animal, versus if they were eating anything else, right? So these are certain things that you need to bear in mind. And then the requirements for fat. So these are all expressed in percentages. So you don't have to kind of worry about putting this together when putting a meal, but this is just so that you are aware, especially if you're buying like packaged food. This is something you need to be aware. If you're putting together a home cooked meal, how you achieve this, we will get to that in a little bit. But this is something most people aren't aware of. And so that's why I kind of wanted to share this a little bit, so that you understand what the nutritional requirements of a domestic dog is. Basically, there are essential minerals that are required. So fats and things like calcium and phosphorus, they have to be in certain specific ratios. If they are like over the range of that ratio or lower, then there's kind of dysfunction as well. So that's something that is very critical, especially like calcium and phosphorus in growing dogs and adult dogs. That is something that needs to be kept in mind. You have like potassium, sodium, chloride, magnesium, iron, copper, manganese. So these are all minerals that a dog would need for healthy function. And then you can see there are 10 or 11 different vitamins that are required. So now the question is, now that you know what nutrients are required, the question is, how can a dog get these nutrients? Can they get all of this from a meat-based diet? Can they get all of this from a plant-based diet, right? So let's look at that now. Just go back to sharing my presentation. So dogs can derive nutrition both from plant-based matter, yes, and from meat-based matter. There are certain differences, like the amino acids that I discussed. Like, for example, if your dog was eating the heart of another animal, they're more likely to get the taurine and carnitine from there. The other 10 amino acids that I mentioned as well are present more in the animal material that they would be eating. They're also the 10 amino acids are also present in plant-based matter, and how much we will get to that in a little bit. And how you can kind of create that balance, we will discuss that as well. Vitamins and minerals, you get those plenty in plant-based matter, and there, in fact, research also indicates that they are digested better when made available in plant-based matter. So they would, like, if you were home, for example, if you were home cooking, and this is also true for meat-based diets, like if you were prepping a meal and home cooking, there is certain supplementation that you would need when putting together a meal to make sure it's complete and balanced per the AFCO guideline, because over time, we've kind of degraded our planet, and so plain food is no longer enough, right? Like the quality of nutrition over time has sort of, and plant-based and animal-based matter has kind of gone down. So that's one of the reasons why you need additional supplementation to create a proper balanced diet. And we will see a little bit more of how and why there's been this degradation. So when you use the right ingredients and the right supplementation, you can actually get a balanced food. So that's what most of the commercial foods do, right? Like whether it's meat-based or plant-based. Like, for example, let's take kibble first, right? So kibble, this is prepared through a process called extrusion. So which is like subjecting plant-based and animal-based matter to extreme temperatures. For plant-based, it's basically to kind of break down some of the lectins and phytates, which are also known as anti-nutrients that affect digestion in dogs, right? So when the process of extrusion happens, some of it is broken down as part of that process, and then the kibble, the dry matter, is basically bound with starch and moisture to kind of form the pieces or pellets that you see. And then later on, there is something that is called digest, that is sprayed. Basically, it is fat. In case of meat-based diets, that is fat that is sourced from fish. And in case of plant-based diets, it's basically oils that are sourced from plant-based ingredients like sunflower seeds, etc., or canola oil, right? So to make it more palatable, basically. So that's basically your dry food. So and then you have the wet food, right, that comes in cans or trays. So these foods are also subjected to high temperatures, basically to prevent microbial activity. And they're a little bit more acidic as well, because for the reasons of preservation. So both dry food and wet food will actually contain things like preservatives and stuff like that. So based on the nature of the processing that they go through, there's definitely some loss of nutrients that happens. So to compensate for that, most pet food manufacturers will supplement the food with additional supplements to be able to make it complete based on the AFCO guideline. So now what if you were like feeding raw, for example, right? So with raw food too, there is some level of nutrient supplementation that needs to be done based on how you're putting together your meal. And the same holds true for a plant-based diet, whether if you're home cooking as well. There is certain supplementation that is required, and I will discuss that more in detail, why and what supplements would be required for that. So that the nutrient is complete in a meal. So now that we've discussed whether dogs can eat get their nutrition from plant-based or meat-based diet. We will discuss a little bit more about, you know, the quality of the nutrition. So this I briefly touched base when I was going through the evolutionary changes. There is a debate over bioavailability. So people say that the bioavailability of a meat-based food is higher compared to plant-based food. So the difference where it lies is if the plant-based foods are not prepared in the right way, then yes, the bioavailability and digestibility will be lower. So what that means is certain plant-based ingredients like lentils, beans, they have something called anti-nutrients like lectins and phytates, which is basically nature's way of protecting the seeds, right? Or the from the seeds being destroyed from like bugs and things like that, or environmental aspects, right? So that's how nature protects the seeds. But so that when the right material is available, they will germinate and bloom into a plant. So that's when the nutrition is higher. And so if the plant-based materials, especially things like lentils and beans, if they're prepared in the right way, the lectins and phytates can actually be removed, and the food becomes very bioavailable for your dog to be able to absorb in their body. So how is this done? Like one, I mentioned as part of extrusion, they kind of subject it to high temperatures, which kind of reduces some of the amount. Research also shows that when these plant-based ingredients like lentils and beans are soaked for 12 to 24 hours, the lectins and phytates break down, the seeds begin to germinate, so the food becomes more bioavailable. So that's where how you prepare the plant-based ingredients is important for it to be more nutritionally bioavailable, just like meat-based diets. So that's how basically, so these are some things that you need to keep in mind when debating one over the other. So what research says, like in the past, there was a lot of research around meat-based diets. Over the last decade or so, there has been a lot of research that has been going on in the Western world, especially like in Europe and US. There has been some research here as well that kind of says how plant-based diets fares in a dog's life, right? So there is research that suggests that dogs on a plant-based diet live longer than dogs on a meat-based diet. So they live an average of 18 months longer than a dog on meat-based diet, right? We all want our dogs to live healthy, happy, and longer, right? We want to keep them forever with us. So that's one great study. So you will see the link to it when you get this presentation as well, that you can kind of read more about. So this was a study that was conducted in the UK by veterinarian Dr. Andrew Knight and his crew. So some examples of dogs who've lived long on a plant-based diet are like Bramble. Like everybody knows Bramble, right? Like anybody who thinks about a plant-based diet for dogs, the first dog that comes up is Bramble. So there are other dogs. There are several other dogs. These are not the only ones, but I just put a couple here, for example. So he lived up to like 25 years, and he was purely on a plant-based diet. He was an active working dog. So there you go. If your dog is a herding dog, a high energy dog, yes, their nutritional requirements can be met by a plant-based diet. Floyd was another example. He lived to be 20. He was also a collie, an active working dog. So these are just examples of like how well these dogs have thrived. So there was another study that was done by Professor Andrew Knight, which kind of studied dogs on a meat-based diet and dogs on plant-based diet. So these were active working dogs. So these were dogs that were used as part of sledge racing in Alaska. So they found, like, when dogs were put on these meat-based and plant-based diets, they found that dogs on plant-based diets were just as well as dogs on meat-based diet, and their blood, hemoglobin level, etc. Everything was similar to dogs based on a meat-based diet. So that's another example. And these are just my dogs who've been raised on a plant-based diet ever since I adopted them. So Curry will be 17 in a couple months, and Brownie will be 15. So they've been thriving as well. So when I adopted them, they actually came with a host. They were on a meat-based diet, both of them. They came with a host of health issues. So and I was able to work through those by transitioning them through a plant-based diet, which was appropriate for their mind and body type, which is the Ayurvedic diets, what I typically do. So, and there was no looking back since then. So another research study suggests that fewer vet visits, your dogs will be happy, right? Like if they don't have to visit the vet. So this study revealed that dogs on a plant-based diet actually didn't need to visit the veterinarian for diseases as often as dogs on a meat-based diet. So you can see that as well in the link for more detailed reading. This is just a highlight, a summary. So another study revealed that the digestibility of minerals from plant-based matter is way higher than the digestibility of minerals in animal matter. So better health, right? Like if they're absorbing nutrition better, the body's functioning better. So this is even true for cats. And in fact, cats digest plant-based protein even better than dogs. So if you're interested, you can email me and I'll be happy to send you those links on the studies that were done. So how do you get the right diet, or how do you build the right diet for your food if you're not feeding a commercial food, but if you're doing this at home? And I highly recommend, if you can, feed your dogs fresh, whole plant-based food, because the nutrition is way higher in fresh food. So fresh food meaning home cooked food, not what's marketed as fresh food, because that is still like 6 months, 9 months shelf life, right? So that's different from fresh food that's being prepared at home. The nutritional and bioavailability of that food is way higher. There's a lot of prana from an Ayurvedic perspective. There's a lot of prana or life energy in that food, which makes help improve vitality in your dogs and helps remove toxins or ama from the body. So we will leave the discussion for like fresh food versus packaged food for another day. But there is a post on Instagram that you can kind of see why fresh food is better. And you will see that your dogs will thrive and do better on a fresh food diet. So the key here is, like, if the food is formulated, the home cooked food that you're doing, if that is formulated based on an amino acid profile, then the content and the nutritional and bioavailability will be just as meat-based diets or commercial food. So the key is formulating it based on the amino acids. You want to get the right nutrients. So not everybody is a canine nutritionist. So how do you do this, right? So we will discuss that in a second. So I just wanted to share a little bit. I know we're kind of running a little bit over time. I just quickly wanted to run through why feed a plant-based diet, and I'll share links so you could do more detailed reading later. One of the key reasons is bioaccumulation. So what is bioaccumulation, right? So for example, if your dog is eating fish, or if your dog is eating meat, right, like chicken or beef or lamb or something, these animals would basically feed off on grass or plant-based matter, right? So there's certain level of chemicals and pesticides in today's plant-based matter, because they don't have access to organic matter, right? So they kind of consume that. So basically those toxins kind of go into their body, and these are relatively new for the dog, for that animal's body. So they're not able to flush out everything from the body. So it gets accumulated in their body, in the fat tissues, in the tissues of the body, in the excretory organs. That's where these start building up. So now think, if your dog, if the cow or the lamb or chicken was eating this matter every day, how much accumulation happens, right? Now, if your dog, which is on the higher end of the predatory chain, were to eat this, imagine how much accumulation, how much toxin levels they're going to imbibe. And for your dog to be able to flush that out, it's extremely hard on their liver and kidneys to be able to get that. So again, it starts accumulating in his or her body. And then over a period of time, you start seeing that disease starts occurring because they can't process these toxins. Basically, if the body can't get the toxins out of the body, if they don't know how to push it out, it will just collect in the body. And that's where you see a lot of these health issues, right? So by feeding them a plant-based diet, you're feeding a lower amount of toxins compared to when you are feeding a meat-based diet. So you will definitely see health improvement over there because you're reducing the toxic overload one. If you're feeding organic, that's even better because the nutrients that are available in organic food is greater than like the regular food. And plus you're reducing the toxic overload. I see so many cases of dogs and transitioning from a plant-based from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet where they have like E. coli issues, they have salmonella issues. So these are other pathogens, especially when feeding raw, right? So these are some things that come over when feeding a meat-based diet. It also comes over, they're not just limited to the animal, they also can be transferred to humans, so you have that risk as well. So what is the impact if you were to feed an average large dog, about 35 kgs or so per day, a meat-based diet? Think about the animal from the chain where I just described, from from feeding on the grass or plants all the way to their cycled into your dog's bowl. They would be requiring a lot of fresh water for the plants that they're feeding on. They would require grains. Most of the animals these days are fed grains. So that's the amount of grains that they would be needing. This is for one animal that I'm talking. And the amount of forest cover that is lost depending on the type of animal that you're feeding. The carbon footprint, which is like 20 pounds of carbon dioxide that's emitted per meal, per day. So 2 meals a day. And of course, an animal's life, right? We're kind of we are basically depleting our flora and fauna at this rate. So if this is something we don't address, it's going to be a higher concern. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people now switching to alternative proteins as well, right? So these are some things you want to bear in mind. It's not just this, it's more even like the energy that you're feeding from a dead animal versus a plant-based animal, the life force that's there. That's also another thing. Another aspect is basically the health aspect of things, right? So you see like so many dogs these days are developing protein allergies to different meats. And
I think Hetal, you're stuck. Your screen is stuck. I can't hear you or see you.
folks, I think there was a little bit of a disconnect because there was a power cut on our end. So I think the video and the session may have been gone off for a little bit. But I think we're pretty much at the wrapping end, and I just wanted to quickly share a couple testimonials, that's just so that you can see for yourself firsthand how dogs can thrive on plant-based diets. So Shikhar, if you're still on the line, feel free to share your video and your journey with Mickey from a meat-based diet to plant-based diet.
Yes, thank you, Hetal. I'll just take a couple of minutes for this testimonial. Uh, I turned ethical vegan last year. So when Mickey was being fed meat, I was feeling a lot of cognitive dissonance. And with that idea, once you see an animal in a dog, you see an animal in every animal. And that's why I wanted to switch him to a plant-based diet. I started exploring, talking with a lot of vegans, and then through all that search, I came across people. My partner is non-vegan, so the first conflict that we had at our home is that dogs are obligate carnivores. If not obligate carnivores, then at least they're healthier on carnivorous diet. So I was facing that resistance whether I would be even able to switch Mickey to a plant-based diet. So when I got in touch with Hetal, I had a lot of questions one by one, and I was asking for a lot of proofs. Mickey, thank you for featuring in this video. You can go. I was asking for a lot of evidence and proofs and research as to justify whether I could switch Mickey to a plant-based diet. Hetal was there to assist me in a step-by-step with a step-by-step guidance. She prepared a nutritional diet chart for Mickey. Once we started testing the nutritional diet chart, Mickey wasn't ready to accept all the ingredients in the recipe at once. So it was a transitional process. But in that whole transitional process, whatever was working with Mickey, whatever was not working with Mickey, Hetal was ready to guide me. I mean, I would message her on WhatsApp. She would reply to me on the same day with multiple responses, multiple ideas, even whether to take Mickey to a vet or not. For example, he was itching at that time. Uh, I had this doubt in my mind that maybe it's the diet, maybe it's resistance towards carbohydrate or wheat allergy or something of that sort, gluten allergy. Uh, and it turned out that no, he just had fleas, or he just had I mean, he could have had mange. So we just got him the medication and he was all fine. So Hetal is there to give that guidance as to what should be used with animals, what should be applied, how to make sure that they are liking the food they have, how to give that food some delicious touch. For example, sometimes I put peanut butter on top of his food to make sure that everything else tastes good to him. Sometimes I'm giving him tofu, sometimes it's soy chunks, sometimes it's soy, sometimes soy milk. And then I also, I mean, sometimes I experiment on my own. For example, at my personal end, I'm giving Benevo to my cat. It's a vegan cat food. I sprinkle that on Mickey's food too, and he likes it. So all those things Hetal helps me out with, as in if it works or not. I can ask her. I normally ask her if she gives a go ahead to this or not. So it all works. I have verified these diet charts with even non-vegan vets whose go-to suggestion is please give meat to your dogs, or please give at least 2 pieces of chicken every week or something of that sort. Even they were not able to find any flaws in the diet chart that Hetal had shared. And Mickey has been doing pretty well. He has very silky fur, something that I did not know. He was healthy even before, so I did not switch him to a plant-based diet due to his health issues. But after turning him to a plant-based diet, it turned out that Mickey was even livelier, even healthier, even happier. So even the aspects of Mickey that I was not aware of, I started seeing them unlock once he was switched to a plant-based diet. So I'm pretty happy with how it's going. And the best thing is that I recognize that, okay, as an animal lover, I'm able to stay consistent towards all animals. So that helps me a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Shekhar. And I think the important part here is to understand that it's a process of transition. So you have to understand what your dog is currently eating and what you want to transition to. So there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. And I think I'll do a whole separate session on just the transition aspect, because I'm sure more people would be interested. And that's where most people face a challenge or tend to give up because of the process, right? So we'll do a separate, more detailed session for that. And so here's another quick testimonial that I just wanted to share. So this was a dog back that's in Boston. His name is Nicky. And Nicky basically has a condition called polyarthritis. Basically, it's an autoimmune condition. And he was on a raw food diet all his life. And when he transitioned, I'm not playing the video here because it's a little long and I want to be mindful of the time. So I'll just summarize it. So basically, he switched over to a plant-based diet, and they found that the relapses of his condition basically reduced. It went from almost to nothing, and then we incorporated certain Ayurvedic supplements which actually helped manage his condition, and now he's thriving on a healthy life. And this was a dog that started the transition at the age of 10-11 years, and he's been doing really well. And interestingly enough, after his dog switched over to a plant-based, after Maria's dog switched over to a plant-based diet, the family switched to a plant-based diet as well, just looking at the changes in Nicky. So if you were interested in seeing that,
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm from the Boston area, and I'm a mother of an 11-year-old Shih Tzu named Nikki. Currently, my son, as we think of him as, is battling a polyarthritis, which is an autoimmune condition, and it paralyzes all his legs. And that's why I went on my own research of what the best food is out there for him and the best supplements, not synthetic or chemical, but herbal supplements. And so far, it's doing great. I discovered that raw food is the way to go. That's just for me, not for anybody else, I guess. You have to do your own reading. But for me and for Nikki, raw is the best thing to go. And I went on Etsy and I saw Korean pepper. Not only do they sell the best toothpaste, but they also have the Ayurvedic or the vegan diet. And what we've noticed is that even if Nikki goes in a relapse, it's very, very minimal. You could hardly even notice that he's limping. And by that time, we already nip it in the bud and we give him his herbal supplements. So I would say that vegan has totally changed the way the relapse comes, and it's few and far between. I'd like people to really try the food from Korean pepper, the vegan food. Even if they say that it's all seeds and turmeric and whatnot, if you do your own research, you would see that the ingredients that Hetal puts into this food, every single ingredient is beneficial to the dogs, because we as humans, part of his food is turmeric. And I take turmeric for inflammation, and I've seen a big difference with Nikki. So every single ingredient in the Korean pepper food, everything is beneficial. Nothing is artificial. Everything has benefits. As a mother of an 11-year-old dog that has an autoimmune condition, I am very, very happy with this food.
For later viewing, given the time constraint. This is Sunny. This is actually Korean Brownie's first doggy friend. And she was on a meat-based diet as well. And she always had GI issues, and her mama was like, dogs cannot live on a plant-based diet, But when she saw how Korean Brownie were thriving, she tried like organic foods, everything, raw diets and stuff, but they were never able to resolve the GI issues. But she's like, what, I've tried everything, I'll try this as well. And she started Sunny on a plant-based diet, and her GI issues vanished. And now she's thriving on a plant-based diet, and like there's been no looking back since then, So these are just a few examples. There are many more cases. If you Google up, also you'll find from other people, other brands and stuff like that. So dogs do and can thrive on plant-based diets as long as the nutrition is carefully formulated. It's fully balanced. That is the key. So with that, I'll wrap up the presentation. So I wanted to share that for a limited time, I'm offering a free 20-minute nutritional assessment for your dog. So if you would like to book, you can actually go onto our Instagram page and click on the book now, or just scan this QR code or visit this link and book your session. So I will assess where your dog's diet is currently and where it should be. And I'll give you options on how you could get there if you would be interested. So this would be for dogs only at the moment. If you're interested, feel free to book this session on from Instagram, or I will DM the link for booking as well. Post this session in the email, and you can schedule it off there as well. So be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to learn about how you can improve your dog's mind, body, and spirit well-being. So I believe in holistic therapies that are inspired by Ayurveda, and everything that I do is plant-based because plants have immense healing power. And I also do flower therapies where dogs and cats, if they have health issues, to address some of those. And I also do plant stem cell therapy as well for healing. So we'll leave those topics for a different day. So any Q&As? I think there's been a bit of a challenge because we went offline, right, because of the power cut. So Naman will help us kind of, he'll share the questions that you guys may have posted. We may have lost those because I think Google Meeting deletes them when it gets disconnected. So Naman, are you able to see the questions that were posted?
Nope. I think I've lost them. Stuti had posted 3 questions.
Okay, so maybe Stuti, if you want to just unmute your line and just share the questions that you have, and I'll address them.
So a lot of times packaged foods are misleading in terms of nutrients they provide, especially with meat-based dry kibble food or others. How do we check this?
Yeah, so there are resources available where you can actually get to see how much true protein and fat and carbohydrate, the macronutrient content is. And I'll share with that to you offline. You can use that to kind of calculate. But none of the packaged food is going to say how much amino acids it has or how many minerals and vitamins, where the percentages lie. They are not, because they are not required by the AFCO guidelines to publish that. But however, you can email and ask for it, and if it's a good company, they will share that information with you, because they are required to do that testing for every batch of food that is manufactured. Being in the pet food industry, we used to manufacture plant-based baked kibble as well as fresh foods in the US, so I have been through that cycle. And so you should not, we used to share this information with our people when asked. So you should not hesitate to ask them for that question. Just drop them an email. If it's a good company, they will definitely share the information. But I do strongly suggest at some point, do consider switching to fresh food, because it makes a whole lot of difference. Because the preservatives that are there in the packaged food is basically building up toxic overload in your dog's kidneys and liver, which basically kickstarts the aging process at a very early point in life. So you want to basically slow that progression down, So, and especially if your dog have health conditions, they will thrive on a fresh food diet as opposed to like a packaged diet. So generally, like with dogs with kidney conditions like CKD and stuff like that, they're given prescription diets, protein restrictions, which is not true. Research now shows that they need higher, the protein content does not have to be restricted. You don't have to, like, the worst food you can give is kibble, because it lacks moisture, it aggravates pitta. And that's the worst thing you can do for the kidneys. So just things to keep in mind. Any other questions?
There's one more question. Do meat-based diets cause more health issues due to the way farm animals are raised for food in unhygienic or stressful environment?
Absolutely. So I see there was a couple months back, I was working with a case where we were transitioning the dog from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet because he had certain health issues like gout. While the gout, I don't know if it was specifically from his meat-based diet, but he had GI issues because of consistent E. coli infections. So that's very common, and like you will see very often recalls on packaged food because of E. coli. You will see E. coli issues with raw foods too. And if you think about it, in the wild, when the wolf kills a prey, they eat it right there. They're tearing open the carcass and eating it right away, right? And their stomach acid levels are way higher than a dog's stomach acid level. So they're able to handle that. But the modern dog, the pH of their stomach acid is not like that of a wolf. It's very different. So they're not able to process those pathogens in the meat-based foods. So that's something which sometimes does lead to health issues. There are other things like we're seeing an increase in protein allergies, which was not very common before, because I think now, because of the, like what I mentioned, the process of bioaccumulation, there is a lot of toxic overload in the farm animals that they're eating, right? Because of the pesticides and everything, and they're not able to excrete those. So you kind of now basically see the dog is then now with so much overload of toxins, they don't know how to process. Their gut gets impacted. They have leaky gut and things like that, and they start showing protein sensitivities to a lot of meat-based. And that's where you'll see a lot of people switching from one meat to another meat, or going to a hydrolyzed protein diet, which is not ideal either, because you want to be able to feed your dogs whole foods that are the best sources of nutrition and easily absorb nutrition for your dogs. So yes, there are reported cases. So there was a study that was done, which actually revealed that dogs are highly sensitive or intolerant or allergic to meat and dairy, especially like things like eggs, milk, like goat milk and stuff like that, beef, and there were a few other. there were just 1 or 2 plant-based ingredients, but most were meat-based ingredients that they were allergic to. So there is an increase in this that they're seeing.
Right. Thank you so much. Because I think we've also noticed a similar pattern in one of our dogs, that whenever he used to consume meat-based foods, you would see a lot of aggression in his nature. He would become a lot more, you can say, sensitive towards his surroundings and reactive in certain cases as well. So I think that explains.
Yeah. So while I don't think there is any study, I've been looking for it, but I haven't come across. But there is the gut-brain axis. So you are what you eat. It's the same with animals. They are what they eat, right? So based on the food that they eat, there is a change in the microbiome in the gut. And the microbiome in the gut is directly, which is considered the second brain, is directly connected to the brain, which basically drives emotions and behavior, right? So there is definitely that connection in there. And the other thing to bear in mind is too much of nutrients and is also a problem, and too less of a nutrients is also a problem. And you will see physical, emotional, and mental manifestations if the diet is not right. So this is just one of the founding blocks. The diet is one of the founding blocks of raising a healthy dog. We will go through the others in a different webinar, but this is very key. I find that most people feel like yogurt and rice, or like lentils and rice, and these are not balanced nutritions, especially if you're feeding plant-based food, or they do just chicken and rice. These are not balanced foods. It is key to feed a balanced diet. Once you start feeding a balanced diet, you will see the change in their health, and you will actually be able to prevent disease. Any other questions before we call it a wrap?
There's one more question. So I need suggestion for feeding street dogs, especially mothers who are milking and the newborn puppies.
Sure, there is a recipe that we have for that you can use for feeding strays. The level of supplementation that would be required for lactating mothers would be a little bit higher than an adult maintenance dog. And maybe who's asking this question? Is it Elizabeth?
This is from Ipsita.
Ipsita. Okay. So Ipsita, I will actually DM you on WhatsApp with the dosage that you would need to feed from the curry and pepper meal balancer. And there is a very simple recipe that's available on my website on the blog that's called feeding. There's a post that says feeding strays. You can use that same recipe, and there will be certain recommendations that I would suggest on WhatsApp, and you can actually use those suggestions to be able to feed the strays that are lactating. So they would require certain nutrients a little bit more, and so that's where you would need to enhance the level of curry and pepper meal balancer that you're feeding.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So if you have any questions post this session after you go through the research and everything, feel free to message us on either Instagram or WhatsApp, and I'll be happy to assist you because together I think we can make the change and help our animals live a happy, healthy life while preserving our flora and fauna as well. So thank you, everybody. I will send out a replay of the recording if that works out, because I don't know with the power cut what's happened to it. But if that works out, I will send you. If not, I'll just separately record the session and send the replay. I will also send out the slides so you guys have it for reference. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I really appreciate you taking out the time for improving your pet's well-being.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.